Hey folks, well it's Christmas time again, or at least it's December, and that means that some of the breweries have been putting out their advent calendars or special beer cases for Christmas time. This year there is one put out by Red Racer. In the past it's been Red Racer, Central City and Parallel 49, but this year it's just Red Racer. So in the past, when I've been reviewing these things, I kind of went day by day and did each beer, but as you can see, these were at day 14 I think today, and these are the first 8, so I thought I would just combine everything and kind of give you a brief synopsis as my thoughts of these beers, and whether or not there's something that they should continue brewing. So, let's get started. First of all, it's called Red Racer's The Great Canadian Outdoor Adventure Pack, featuring 24 new craft beers. Always an exciting thing to see whether or not some of this stuff is really good or if it's just passable. And every day is a new adventure because well, I know some folks who just kind of open them up and drink them as they see fit, but I traditionally have gone through starting at the first one and working my way through until day 24, which is Christmas Eve. So just going through the first 8, day 1 was a Rosé Saison at 6%, day 2 Icefall Irish Coffee Stout at 7%, Winterhalter Wet Beer is at 6% was day 3, V-Trail Barrel Aged IPA at 6%, day 4, day 5 Tape to Tape Gin and Lime Lager at 5.5%. Day 6, Free Ride Smoked Sea Salt Belgian Ale. Day 7, Ski Lift Green Tea Lager at 5%. And day 8, Bundle Up Sweet Potato and Maple Ale at 6%. So some of those combinations you might be shaking your head and saying, what the hell were they thinking? 6 out of the first 8 were flavored beers. Now, if you don't like flavored beers, and I don't necessarily like them too much, I like to stick to traditional kinds of things. With flavors actually added when brewing, so they weren't added afterwards, they were part of the brewing process. Like wine, gin and lime, smoked sea salt, and sweet potato and maple. Even the IPA, which was on day 4, was aged in a barrel and took on some of the characteristics of the barrel itself, or whatever was in the barrel. 7 of the 8 are what they call strong beers at 6% plus. Only the green tea was at 5%, and so nothing in the first 8 days was what you would call a session ale, anything below 5%. So all kind of up there, and most of them were high test. So, do they work? That's the big question, and as I kept pulling them out and seeing these flavored things, I was wondering what's their idea? So, for the most part, as far as I'm concerned, no, they don't necessarily work. Like I said earlier, I don't really like flavored beers per se. It depends what it's flavored with and kind of how strong that flavor is. I don't really like mapley or pumpkin beers that are overly those particular flavors because they become insipid after a while. The Rosé Saison, which was day 1, actually has wine as part of the ingredients, which gives it had a sort of a rosé tint to it. It was kind of on a reddish color, and it worked for me actually. It was kind of like a Saison, and was refreshing, crisp, clean, and lots of carbonation. So that one was okay actually. The stout started to taste more like actual Irish coffee as it warmed up. When it was cold, it kind of a little bit of Irish coffee, but that one also had some whiskey and lactose in it. So it had that mouth feel of kind of a creamy texture to it. So it was okay, and it was at 7%, so you know you were getting your good bang for your buck in that one. The lagers, all of them were pretty nondescript as far as I'm concerned, and I wouldn't buy any of them if they weren't in the pack and you were kind of forced to have them. I'm not a real fan of wit beers either, and there was one of those. But this one was kind of crisp and clean, and it was very refreshing. So on a hot summer's day, it would have been fine. The Belgian ale with smoked sea salt was actually pretty interesting. It doesn't sound like a kind of a... I know there are a couple of beers out there that Salty Dog or something like that have salt in them, and this one didn't really have like an overpowering salty taste to it, but it was interesting, and it added some complexity to an already complex Belgian type of beer. So I actually liked it, and maybe the salt actually cuts through some of the yeasty kind of flavor that a lot of wit beers have. Sweet potato and maple are certainly a strange combination to add to beer, and again, they were added during the brewing process, but strangely enough, it really wasn't too bad. The sweetness was not overpowering, and it was crisp and bubbly with a nice little bite to the finish, so it was kind of bitter at the end. So you kind of had that sweetness at the front, and then as you swallowed it and finished it off, it was a little bit more bitter, so the hops were coming through. Pretty nice balance, actually. Again, would I buy it? I'm not too sure, but it was a nice try. The IPA was probably my favorite, which doesn't surprise me. I do like IPAs. Not simply because it was an IPA did I like it, but because most of the others seem to be trying too hard to be different. You know, add green tea. It did nothing. So, like I say, adding some of these flavors, they're not necessarily doing anything with the brewing process itself, with different kind of hops or different kind of malts, etc. It was simply throwing some types of tasting things like green tea, like sweet potato, that kinds of thing, to see what kind of came up. It was almost like an experiment to see what they and how weird they could make these things. Like I say, for the most part, they didn't work for me. One thing I did learn is that day number 3, it was called Winterhalter Wit Beer, and I did learn that the ski lift was actually invented by somebody named Winterhalter. Now, isn't that appropriate that a ski lift, which is a winter sport for skiing, was actually invented by somebody named Winterhalter? So there you go. First 8 days, I'm through those now, and of course it's day 14, so I'll be sampling that one today, and do the next 8 after maybe in the next day or so, or at least when 16 is finished. So, hope you enjoyed that. Like I say, I haven't really enjoyed these overly much. They're not necessarily to my taste or to my liking, but hey, it's always fun to open up the case and see what the day holds as far as the beer is concerned. They are all 500 milliliters, which is kind of a bonus from previous years. And so you're getting your money's worth as far as quantity of beer necessarily. The quality isn't necessarily what you want, but anyway, so it's been fun. Hope you've enjoyed this. Will we see these again? Probably not. I don't think so. Anyway, signing off for now, and see you in a couple of days for the next 8. Okay?